Good morning, everyone. We're going to get into the stock market technical analysis charts. So I've got some really important things to point out in this video, and hopefully you're able to really read these charts, follow these videos, kind of follow along with the trade ideas that I'm constantly putting out there. Many of those, work out. I can't guarantee that they're all going to work out. I can't guarantee that, every read or analysis on a chart or the market's going to be right. But what I can guarantee is the fact that I'm going to continue to put in the work to try to find these trade ideas. And, really it's all about finding the ones that work and managing the trade appropriately. So all these concepts I teach in my course, and that is in the link is in the description below. So check that out and let's get right into it. All right, triple Qs. This is your tech sector. So right now we've broken this trend line, this kind of upper trend line, and we've headed straight down to this lower trend line right there. So we're basically at that level I've talked about where if this breaks, and I think we're heading, we're going to go lower basically and maybe get a correction. One thing that I've talked about on the daily chart here, and just the level to watch right now, I believe is right around this 336 area. So we're basically right there. Watch that level. That's going to be important. Okay, so one thing I want to point out just on the daily chart, the negative divergence. So what did we recently do? Well, we ramped up and made a slightly new high right up in here. That was a new high above the previous high right there. But when we did that, you'll see that the momentum was less, or this is what's known as negative divergence. So the momentum indicators made a lower high than the previous high. Here's your high, here's kind of the lower high basically. And so as I zoom that in, you'll see on the PPO, we're starting to turn down right there. And on the RSI, we've turned down already. You can see the RSI is turning down. So that confirms the negative divergence. Usually to get negative divergence, you want to see something put in a lower high and then start to turn down, kind of creating that top. And that is a lower high than the previous. So here's your previous high in the RSI. There's your lower high. That's really all you're looking for is just trends. You're looking for lower highs or higher highs and divergences from price. So price made a new higher high than the previous one, but the momentum made a lower high. So momentum was diverging from price, or price was diverging from momentum. So that's a negative divergence, and now we look for a break of trendline support. And right now, the only trendline support I can find is this trend line right about here. So I'm waiting for a breakdown of that. I suspect that will come, and we will likely start to, we got a gap to fill down here. So there's your gap. I think we'll likely at least head down to that gap, down at 327.70. So watching for that. Looking at the SPY, we're starting to break that trend line there. Here's your hourly. See that nice clean hourly trend line, and we're getting a breakdown or a sell signal. So in my mind, I think that sets us up for a move back down to this blue trend line, which is about it's right around 402, 403 right now. That trend line is your bull market trend line, going all the way back to 2009. So I switched to a weekly chart here. This is a weekly, this is going back all the way to 2009. And there's your support. See the blue trend line, how it held support. We broke in 2018. The Fed this is when the Fed was hiking interest rates. So the Fed being in the market, they've been a dominant force in the market and determining the direction. We broke the trend though, and they've been supporting the market ever since. So there's your stimulus. There's interest rate cutting. There's a bunch more, and you can see right now this is where we're at. So we've overshot that trend line. What I'm going to watch for is if we come back to this trend line, does it hold or do we break back down? If we break back down, we likely just saw the top of the market, and it's really hard to call the top. I mean, when the charts form up and I start putting out videos saying, okay, I think this is the top. I've put out a couple of them. It's because the chart at that moment in time looks like it's hitting the top. But, the reason why I try to put out videos saying I'm calling the top or this looks like the top is because I don't want to wait till we're way down here in a clear and obvious bear market and say, hey guys, that was the top. That doesn't do anybody any good. So, the probability is when I call the top, I'm obviously going to be wrong more often than right. But You only have to be right once when calling the top, and you'll make up for all those losses. All right, so moving on. SPY looks like it's heading down to that 403 area. IWM, this one is the big mover today. Here's the hourly chart. So again, I talked about this range right here at about 220.50 and a break to the up or downside, and that's the direction this thing's going. Clearly, we broke to the downside. There's an impulsive breakdown right there. So this likely means to me that on the day we're heading down to this level. Yeah, we might get there today, but down around 211. This trend line down here, 211, 209. And that trend line comes off the March 2020 lows. You can see we hit support, held support there, held support there. Several reactions. I think we're coming down to test that. All right, I don't know when that'll be, but I'm watching that trend line. A break of that trend line, and we're likely going to put in a much more sustainable downtrend. So again, that's the trend line to watch. The move down from where we're at now down to that trend line, it's about a 3% or so drop. So we'll watch for that one. Take a look at gold real quick. No real technical change right now. So the only thing that I'm really watching for gold is that 1790. That's resistance right there. A break above that and a nice daily close above that. Looking for breakouts. You want to see an impulsive break above that. That's really the next move, which likely will set us up for a more sustainable uptrend. Until we break above that, there's basically, that's resistance. So we just watch that. The miners are hanging in there today, doing okay. Look at Franco-Nevada up 2% or so. That one's just nice, clean up trend line. Nothing's technically changed in these miners. So they are continuing to be just in an uptrend. That's all I really see is uptrend. I don't see a technical change. Here's Agnico Eagle coming into major resistance right here. So that's an area where you're likely going to get some sort of a reaction right around this 66.98. We're coming into that now. Probably get a pullback, maybe back down to this 62. But again, watching for a breakout of that downtrend line. I think we're likely going to get it. And a lot of these other miners are just kind of hanging in there, either flat or up, slightly. So in general, miners look good. Look at Newmont. That's the largest gold miner. That one's starting to push the highs in this trend. So in general, we're trending up, and we'll move on. Next, I want to talk about financials. There's a sell signal in the financials. That's a clean breakdown on the daily chart. So there's your uptrend line. You get a breakdown and a sell signal. We had negative divergence, so I talked about that in several videos. My trading style, oftentimes I'm going to talk about the trade and find the setup before it actually plays out. So most of the trade ideas you're going to know about in advance because of just how the trading style works. You look for negative divergences. They usually continue to build for a little while, and then we look for a break of that trend. So there's your breakdown. I think financials are likely coming down to, we probably have a level of support right here at 31.60, and then down here at this more major trend line at $30. That major trend line, if you go to the weekly, that goes all the way back to 2011. You can see we held support there, held support there, and then it was resistance when we broke in the COVID crash. See the resistance? So we broke above, so yeah, I think we're coming back down to that trend line. All right, just to cover Snap again. Snap selling down another 4.5% today. Again, we clearly got rejected right there at that resistance line. We tested it for 6 days or so. And I kept telling everyone, look at how it's, this is why it's important to watch these candles when you're at major levels. Again, I talk about this concept in my course, but when you bid up through a level and then it sells off and still gets the close below, that's rejection. So you'll see that was rejected, and now we're selling off. Again, I likely think we're heading down to fill this gap in Snap down at $29. Now, I'm not going to wait for the entire gap to fill. What I'll likely do is as we sell down, I'll start to cover. Probably I'll start to cover down around gap fill right here about 35. And I'm going to start to cover any kind of dips down into the gap. I'll look to cover out the trade. But again, that's a really, if we do that, we're going to drop, let's say just to the top of the gap 40%. So I like that. Still working. This one's, if you shorted it at resistance, this thing's up already 10% or so. I haven't talked about this one for a while, Carvana. I'm still short this thing. I'm just sitting in it. It's really gone nowhere. I mean, you can see we got a sell signal. There's your sell signal right there. When you break that trend, here's your trend line right there. We got the sell signal. They whipped it back above, but then it came back below. There's another sell signal. Look at these, as it breaks, especially right here, came back up, hit resistance, clean rejection that on that day. And it's just been treading sideways now for, weeks basically. So I'm just waiting for the price to start resolving to the downside, for the sellers to realize that they're in control. And we're going to push this thing down to the trend line right down here. There's your major trend line. And that will come in, that's going to come in right around 174 or so. So that's the area I'm looking to cover that one. But just sitting in that, and it's not going up, it's not going down. We're just waiting. Nike's on a sell signal today. So on Nike, Nike had this uptrend line back here, right? And we started to put in negative divergence. See the negative divergence right there? So this was these highs were divergent highs. We then failed and got the sell signal basically right there, and it's just been treading water, bouncing, sideways for a while. So the support was right about 131, and you can see this was a quick whipsaw where they dipped it below and then bit it back up, kind of trapping some people, shaking some people out. But look, it did it, broke down again, big gap down and a big sell off. A little bit different than this price action, because this one gapped down and the buyers stepped in. This one, it gapped down and the sellers stepped in. So a little different as of right now. I think Nike's likely. Here's the major trend line on Nike. This goes all the way back to 2009. Nice clean up trend line right there. We break the 200-day moving average. I think Nike's likely going to drift lower down to this trend line. Right now, that's about 105 or so. It depends on when you actually get there. And Etsy, I'm still short Etsy. So, I've been short this thing for a while, basically since we broke trend, and it is continuing to just drift sideways. Hasn't resolved to the downside. It's not going up, not going down. So we're just waiting for this to continue to break down. My next level of support sitting right here, about 166.75. The 200-day moving average is going to be there too. So that's likely the area that it'll find some support. So I'm just waiting for that. And that move, though, is if it drops, that's going to be a drop of about 18%. So that will be a nice drop if that takes place. Etsy also, just negative divergence right there. This all was divergent high price action. So see the negative divergence right there. So making new higher highs in price, although momentum was dropping off. And now momentum's clearly, not carrying this thing higher. It's just we're not moving down yet. So we just have to wait for that break of that price shelf. And usually when you get that after an extended sideways, if you break down, it's going to be a swift drop. So you'll see, we might drop down in 1 to 2 days and kind of wipe out all this sideways price action in just a couple days. AMD just, again, just kind of continues to drift sideways. I'm still looking for more downside. Again, this is your 2016 trend right here. So on the daily chart, we go all the way up to, that's a long trend. And we've clearly started to break this trend. We broke, we back tested. We haven't had that impulsive selling yet, but I do think we're going to get it. And so my target right now is this $59 area. See this thin zone right here where we just kind of gapped up and traded right through it, and not a lot of trading took place. If we get down into there, I think we're heading right to the bottom of that zone, which is about 59. So, and that was resistance back here several times as well. So that should be your next level of support. And that's the trade idea for that one. Where we're at now, down to there, that's a drop of about 25%. So we're going to continue to just let that thing play out until it proves us wrong. Where does it prove us wrong? Well, if we run up and recover this trend line, start to hold and start to move higher, within here, then that's when you're wrong and you can stop out. So that's the name of the game. Keep your losses small, and know when you're wrong, and that's when I would assume that I'm wrong, is up in there. DraftKings, you can see again, it's just heading right down towards my target down here at about $49. I've got it kind of circled. We clearly broke. We're breaking down that support shelf and just heading lower. So that one's playing out as expected. Big negative divergence that's been intact, and it's head and shoulders pattern as well. See the head and shoulders? There's the shoulder, there's your head, or your shoulder, and we are breaking that neckline heading south. So again, likely a potential near-term top in DraftKings, and this one might actually break this trend line right here. I'd want to wait for the break of the trend line, but if it does, then I think this thing could go a lot lower. So keep an eye on that. Point this one out, Redfin. So the Redfin, here's your trend line. It's not we broke below it just briefly right here. So that's a little questionable, but you can see all the reactions we had on this trend line back here on this daily chart. And then once we resume that or recover that broken trend, we really held that as support again up here. And what do we have going on? Well, we got a sell signal and a breakdown right there today. Negative divergence, big negative divergence. So this was your divergent high price action, and we're breaking down, breaking that major trend line support. So if that goes, then I think we're likely heading down to this area, down 33 bucks. You can see we held resistance here, held support right there. So I would say right anywhere from about 35.50 down to about 32 area would be the next range of support. We have the 200-day right below as well, so we're probably going to bounce off the 200-day and maybe come back up and hit this as resistance and then roll over. But it looks like that's heading down south. So we're going to watch that one. And I'm taking positions in a lot of these trades that I'm talking about. I don't think it's that important for me to point out what I'm positioned in, or I'll talk about the ones I'm positioned in, and I'll talk about how I'm trading them, or if I'm going to stop out, or if I'm going to take profit. But usually I talk about the levels well in advance, that if they go down to the levels that I'm looking at, I'm usually I'm taking profit when I'm hitting profit levels. So you don't really need to wait for me to tell you that if you know the levels that that I'm pointing out in my videos. And we'll wrap up with Lennar. So these are all trade ideas I've been talking about for a while, and you just have to give them time to play out. But here's Lennar, starting to break down some more today, down 3% or so. And Lennar, you had this. You basically look at the hourly here. You've got this bearish rising wedge right here on Lennar. We broke down, back tested. I circled the back test, and we're starting to now work our way lower, making a new lower low today. So I'm looking at Lennar coming down to about this 95 area for the next level of support. From where we're at now, that's a drop of another 5%. Not a huge trade. Again, this pattern's on the hourly chart. So when you have a pattern on the hourly chart, it usually doesn't play out for as big of a move. But I think we'll get some support or a bounce there. But if we break that, you can see there's a much more major level of support right there at 71.60. If I extend this out, look at that support. You hit resistance, and then once you broke above, it was support. So a move all the way down to there would be the final move in this trade idea. And I do think that's likely. I'll probably take a little bit of profit at this first level of support if we get there, of course. And then we'll see if we can let the rest ride down to this more major level of support where I'll most likely close out the trade. All right, so that's working, and lots of the trades that I've talked about are working. I mean, the shorts are working, and the longs that I have on gold miners, those are all up today. So in general, these trade ideas, it's a good day for these trade ideas, at least today. Doesn't mean it's going to continue, but today we're working. So thanks, guys. Leave me a thumbs up, leave me a comment below, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Bye.